Thanks for tuning into this presentation. You're about to either watch a video or listen to audio recorded at the Grassroots Radio Conference in 2012 at the Independent Media Center in Urbana-Champaign. Please enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are you doing? I would say welcome to the Grassroots Radio Conference, but y'all have been here like 2 days before me. So I just got here, but it's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I was fishing for that. Thank you for participating. But yeah, I currently, so first I'm just gonna say, Grassroots Radio Conference, very much needed. That's why we're all here. It's great to do the work in our silos, wherever we're at, but knowing that you're part of a larger movement is not only encouraging, but it's critical, right? Because I think we all know, those of us that work in this sector, meaning the not-for-profit or nonprofit sector, that burnout's really a really real thing. And a lot of times it's because you feel like you're fighting an ocean by yourself. And for me, when I get to go to events like this, it just reminds me that I'm not fighting alone. And sometimes that's enough to get me to GRC 2013, without shooting myself in the head. So this stuff is important. It's also important how we kind of trade, right? Like trade, not really trade secrets, but trade skills and really empower each other's work, even though sometimes geographically we're not able to support in person like we like to all the time. We can support each other with ideas. So today I want to just kind of set the groundwork. I'd asked about upstairs, and this gentleman here, who I'll get everybody's names in a second, said that Danielle kind of facilitated a discussion upstairs, and that's what I want to do here. I want this to be a strategy session and a workshop, and I want you to feel free to bring your individual, whatever you're working on. Like we're gonna really kind of put that on the table here, and as a group, after we kind of give some context and talk about, and let me share some of the framework that I want to share with you. And as a group, feel free to offer you, like, I'm dealing with this, and this is how, and what would you suggest? And I'm sure, like some of the people who are early, this is as much about me learning from you guys as it is you guys learning from me. So that's how I want to just kind of set the dynamics for today. Like I'll actually sit down so there's not this up-down dynamic so we can do it right. But so that being said, yes, make yourself at home. That being said, I'll start with my background. I do have notes and I should follow. I do that. I make all these notes and then I get up there and start speaking and never ever look back at my notes. It's ridiculous, really. But this will help me stay on task because I want to get you out on time. Yes. Okay. So I think I already covered that. Oh man. More of a strategy and messaging workshop from a campaign's perspective. I did miss something. So I want you guys to consider what we're doing today from a campaign perspective, and not Romney Obama campaign perspective, but your organization is essentially a campaign. Most of the times as organizations we have an issue campaign that we're working on, right? And so for those of us in the radio world, a couple of years ago, that issue campaign was Community Radio Act, right? And then now we might be all doing different work through radio as a medium in various sectors of the kind of social justice movement. But I want you to think about your campaign as your organization, as your issue. Good morning. And then as a movement. So I'll talk about that a lot. So I want you to kind of think in terms of threes, right? So, and I feel like after I prepared my presentation, I looked back at the description that I sent before I wrote the presentation. I was like, the description only kind of gives you one idea, that we're just going to talk about how to market your programming, or not market, but as communications people, we try, especially in the Social Justice Center, we try to stay away from the word market because that gets into advertising, right? So our communications plan, right, is going to be yes about promoting and developing tools to really push your programming and make sure it reaches lots of people. But there's kind of two other components that go with that. There's a component about your programming, your station or your organization. So how are you really creating a communications plan for your organization? Like, what is your station, if you have a station, about? Or as Media Literacy Project, we do radio work, but we do all kind of media and communications work. What about our organization, and how are we communicating that? What's our communications plan for that? And then the larger movement, which can be considered the media justice movement, could be considered the the kind of low power FM movement, the community radio movement, whatever we want to connect it to. So there's kind of like these circles, these concentric circles. So it starts small. We have a show on Friday night. How do we get the word out? How do we get that to as many ears and communities as possible? Now our organizational framework and message, how do we get that to as many people as possible? And now for the larger movement, how do we get that to as many people as possible? So we're going to be kind of fluidly going in and out all three. So if it gets confusing, because I talk about all three all the time and I get in my head, like just raise your hand and say, wait, are we talking about the show? Are we talking about the movement? What are we talking about? But I want you guys to understand it from that perspective. And all three are campaigns. They're kind of coalescing campaigns, and they can all aid and help each other. And at the end, all of that will help your organization, and your organization staying alive, your organization growing, your organization having a larger impact helps the movement. And it starts with the show you have on Friday night, right? So that piece, I wanted to make sure framework, brought some ideas to workshop. We'll workshop your ideas and the three categories. Great, I got through all that. So allow me to, what did Jay-Z say? Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Hove. Okay. My name is not Hove. My name is Hakeem. And I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, a media literacy project. And it's really fortunate that I got to be here. I really have to thank Carol, I have to thank Aaron for making sure I got here, because my organization didn't have a budget to be part of the Grassroots Radio Conference this year. And it was one of the things that we talked about 4 months ago in our planning. And we're like, are we going to go? Are we not going to go? And we decided that we couldn't afford it. And then I get a call at work one day and they were like, you want to go to the Grassroots Radio Conference? I was like, sure. So I'm here by virtue of that. But the Media Literacy Project, basically our work is around advocacy and education for media justice. So we have kind of two missions that we fulfill. We do policy work. That's like the fun, wonky stuff that we all like, right? And then we actually do curriculum. So we do lots of curriculums for K through senior center, for people around now. The biggest kind of hot button issue is cyberbullying. And so teachers will call us and say, hey, I'm at a school in Minnesota and we're trying to teach our students about bullying and the impacts of that and seeing it on television and movies. Can you develop a 4-month curriculum that we can use with our teachers? And then we say yes, and we tell them how much. And then we tell them we could come out and do this kind of train the trainer thing with your teachers so that they can then have the curriculum and continue to use it in their schools. But we also do consulting for other nonprofits as well, where they need communication strategy help, and that's kind of more the capacity we'll be talking today. Like, how do we help local radio stations start? So in Albuquerque, we initiated the process for the LPFM window that's going to be open whenever the hell it's going to be open in Albuquerque. And initially, we knew that we wouldn't have the capacity as an organization to run the station, but we do have 2 people in Albuquerque that have experience doing that. And so we consulted with them and brought a bunch of different organizations into the picture. And we have 2 right now that are going to be interested in applying for what we think will be 2 available licenses in Albuquerque. So that's pretty exciting, yes.
Really quick, do you feel like there's going to be a growing interest in bringing media literacy projects into schools? Because, for a lot of us, we have this capacity to do that kind of work. You're really
right.
There's going to be more and more. There's need.
There's need, right.
Is there going to be actual action?
Is there going to be any action? That's a great question. And yes, you're absolutely right. What's great is that the infrastructure is already there to have, by virtue of all the organizations that are in this room, right? The infrastructure is already there to be able to do comprehensive media literacy education and training across the country. How do we make that meaningful to school boards and administrative officials? And we're working on that in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have a particular state representative who's a friend of our organization that has helped us every other year. So in New Mexico, the way the state legislature works is you have a 1-month session, and then on the alternating year, you have a 2-month session. So in the 2-month sessions, a lot more stuff gets seen, not just budget stuff and the big old fight. And in those 2-year sessions, we've introduced a bill that essentially would mandate media literacy at least being offered. And we were successful in getting that resolution through the House, and then it died in the Senate. And so we're going to try again this year. And what we're trying to get is them to say, okay, every school has to offer it. So what that does for organizations like us is that now we have a foot in the schools. And I think that's good enough, because I think that if I'm a 9th grader and I'm super bored with school and I'm too cool for everything, I'm going to look through the program and I'm going to say, oh, this looks cool, at least I'll take that class. So I think if we're in there, our classes will be full, they'll grow, they'll expand. I don't think we need to mandate it. Plus, our Republican governor and legislature don't like the word mandate. But ultimately, we want it to be a requirement. And we think we have a lot of evidence that proves that. I mean, obviously, we could look at the last, we could look at the last, the study that we always quote, and now I'm blanking on it, but 2 years ago, this idea that students get about, maybe 4 hours of actual classroom education a day, like in school, like on average, and then they're in front of some sort of media device, upwards of 10 hours during the day. So you do the math, like which one seems to be a critical thinking skill, a comprehension skill that's necessary, especially as the times change. So we're working on it, and we're hopeful that we could be a prototype to that, so people can see what happens in New Mexico, and then once we are successful, when we are successful, then we'll be able to start really calling all y'all and saying, hey, like lean on your legislature now and see what kind of traction we can get on this. Yeah, yes.
There's a lot of definitions of what media literacy is. Can you tell me
yes.
your meaning by
What ours? That's great. Ours is the ability to access, analyze, and create media. So that's how we simply define it. And actually the structure of our organization is organized around those three tenets. Access, analyze, and create media. There's a popular definition that you could even Google search that has a fourth thing, and we took the fourth thing out because we thought analyze was the same thing, and I can't remember, it's not coming to me now, but it was like access, analyze, critique, and create media. And we were like, well, we'll just put critique into analyze. It makes it more succinct. I can actually write it. Access, analyze, and create media. And so what we're going to be talking about today is access, right? How do we get more people connected to our content, right? And then the education piece is, okay, thank you. I know I did it with my hand earlier. And then obviously for the people in this room, especially radio folks like ourselves, like the real cool kids in the class, we think that reform doesn't just come through trying to get Clear Channel and Comcast to do the right thing. We think that real reform comes from us creating our own media and supporting our own media, which as an artist, I love that. Like, listen to me, don't listen to Lil Wayne. So, I like Lil Wayne, but I pick on him a lot. But this idea for us is that's where we get like basically our whole mission statement around advocacy and education for media. This is advocacy, and then both these two are kind of education. This is advocacy as well, especially as we talk about LPFM and things like that. This creation can be advocacy too. And we have low power TV in Albuquerque. We have low power FM. We have pirate radio, and so it's pretty good. So any other questions? So as we keep moving towards radio, I just wanted to talk about my organization. I have to do that in front, or I will forget. But I want to find out more about you guys. So if we could go around the room, and what did I have? I have 3 things to think about. So tell us who you are, tell us where you are from, and then tell me, when did you fall in love with radio? I borrowed that from, what was it Love and Hip Hop? I forget that one. The movie with Omar Epps. And she's like, when did you fall in love with hip hop? It's like, oh. So when did you fall in love with radio, right? So I'll start over here.
Hey, my name's Eric. I'm from Madison, WIEP LP. And we were also part of the Youth Media Project, which you guys were
Yes.
years ago.
Uh-huh.
So I have a lot of respect for your organization.
I'll pass it on.
Yeah, okay. And when did I fall in love with radio? Way in my youth. Love to hear radio. Love to, like most people, or like many people, came for the music, stayed for the content.
Nice. I like that. That's a good messaging point. Came for the music, stayed for the content. Let's hold on to that, because we're going to talk about messaging later.
My name is Tatiana Santanova. I'm here today from DC, but I was here a year ago, and before that I was in Japan. But I am from the Chicago area most prominently. And so I've always been listening to radio, but kind of how I fell in love with sound was when I was living in Japan, and I was thinking of a good present for my dad. And what I did, I found this book that he loved. It's based on a cartoon that he really likes. And I recorded myself reading it because I was, far away, and so I wanted to read it to him. And it was written in Japanese, so I had a friend translate it into English. I read it in English, and another friend read it in Japanese, and I put on a CD, and I, put the CD in with the book, and I sent him this book. I don't know how he reacted, but to me, like, just doing that and how much meaning there was to it, and I set music to it, background music, and it just, like, something really clicked.
So personal.
Very, very, very personal. So yeah, that was.
Nice, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gregg from Halifax, Nova Scotia, with the Roman Canadian contingent.
Representing.
We're representing Accessible Media Canada, which is a media outlet that basically makes all media content, or endeavors to make all media content available to all Canadians regardless of ability. So vision impairments, any English second language, anything like that. So we do closed captioning, described audio, we read newspapers and make them available daily for people who need to know what was in the paper but can't read the paper.
Sure.
Essentially. I fell in love with radio, I suppose, again, in my youth. Cheesily, I fell in love with Johnny Fever. That was the start of it.
Johnny Fever from WKRP in
Yeah,
Cincinnati.
this is my first crush. And it just kind of like
I did never connected that I totally watched that show coming up, and that probably impacts my love for radio.
I thought about Bailey Quarters and said, why doesn't she get to do anything? And that's where it goes.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah. Snow Leopard.
My name's Snow Leopard. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, but I live in Urbana now. I also apparently falling in love with radio is something you do when you're 14 or so. And since I'm polyamorous, I don't have one lover. There was KISW, sorry, that's not right, I hated them. KZOK in Seattle, Washington, which played album-oriented rock as opposed to singles, so I really liked that. I missed that a lot. I stayed up religiously to listen to the Dr. Demento show from 2 o'clock to 1 in the morning, whenever, Sundays, so that was before school. And finally, my local college radio station in Olympia, Washington, KAOS, had a punk show, and it was the only station I could actually call in and ask them to play a song, which was specifically Black Flag's Nothing Left Inside, because that was how I felt. And they eventually asked me not to call and ask for only that song. They wanted me to, could you ask us to play something else?
Sure.
Because every week I called them and said, but anyway, so it was the responsiveness of, it was the variety of AOR, it was the wackiness of Dr. Demento, and it was the responsiveness of chaos, I think, that is like my idea of what radio could or should be.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. We'll go all the way across the back and we'll work our way up and we'll end with Aaron. So.
Arlene Sweetie.
Are you going to participate?
I could go, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
sorry.
I was going to skip up, it's my fault.
What, just because I'm working a camera?
I was like, you're
invisible.
I didn't want to get in the way, you're working over there, yeah.
So my name's David. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I really got into radio. There was this show in Buffalo. We had radio relayed through Canada. So there was this show on CBC Radio called Brave New Waves, which I loved for years. I just listened to it. It was from midnight to 4 a.m. every night, and I'd listen to like the first hour or so, and I used to like tape it and then make mixtapes from the tapes, and like I just loved it. And then I actually ended up meeting the DJ randomly once. It was pretty cool. So that actually inspired me to do some college radio when I was out at Oregon, University of Oregon. I had a radio show for 3.5 years. It was kind of based on the Brave New Waves model, and I sometimes volunteer at the WEFT here in town. And I live in Champaign, so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, Arlene Sweeting from Sarasota, Florida. I'm with WSLR LP, and I guess I was a late lover of radio. I really think that it happened when I got to flip the switch for our station. The engineer that we worked with, Sarah Allen, she had done a workshop, and she had described FM, and what it is and how it works and its frequency modulation and all this stuff. But she said, but really, FM, it's fucking magic. And when you flip that switch, you know it is.
My name is Mike Murphy. I'm originally from New York, but the past 23 years I've lived in Kansas City. And I, like a lot of people in the room, fell in love with the music. Music is what drew me to radio, and I really like that. I came for the music, I stayed for the content, and that's impacted me a lot. I'm with KKFI, the community radio station in Kansas City. We hosted the Grassroots Radio Conference last year. And I started listening to KKFI because they aired the Grateful Dead Hour. And you know, so I'm a firm believer in music as a healing power, but also for the Pied Piper effect.
Sure.
I mean, I'm an activist because KKFI aired this show, got me to listen. I stayed for the other programming, and I'm ensconced in activism, and it's all because of that music that the Pied Piper effect pulled me in. So,
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cope Constant. I'm from East Coast, West Coast, and here. And my father gave me, I think, the first generation transistor radio. It was turquoise, and it was that big, and it was in a brown leather case, and I was in love. And that was in about 1957. And I've been in love with radio ever since. And when I moved here 15 years ago, the first thing I had to know was where was the good radio, and WEFT is fabulous. And I learned to air shift, and I've had shows, and this conference is fabulous. Thank you all so much for coming to Champaign-Urbana. It means so much to us, really.
I'm Tom Crane, and currently with KKFI in Kansas City, and I guess I've been around radio my whole life. My dad was the chief engineer at WGN TV and radio in Chicago. So I can remember going up to the transmitter at an early age and being around all this stuff for a long time. But as far as influences of radio goes, I can remember when I was going to school, there was a station in Little Rock called KAAY. And they had a show on, I think it was on at midnight, called Bleecker Street. And it was amazing, some of the stuff they did on that show. You know, it was, you'd call that underground music at the time, I guess. And then I also loved Ken Nordine's word jazz. If anybody's ever heard that. You know, some of the things that radio can do and the portraits that we can make. And right now I'm doing something called World Sound Radio, where I play music from the rest of the world and information about different countries around the world too. So.
Thanks so much. Word jazz. I need to remember that word jazz. And we're going like this. I'll go you next, and we'll go and end with Aaron.
Okay. Hi, I'm Naveed. I work at KCSB FM Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara. When I first got to college, I just realized that I wanted to get involved in radio just because I was always interested in non-commercial and alternative music. I always really disliked commercial stations, or just when I was tuning in to anything, I was just like, this is all the same stuff over and over again, as I'm sure many of you can sympathize with. Yeah, so I don't know. Great.
His station's 50 years old.
Yeah, 51 now.
You can't be 50, so you just started.
Let's go here.
My name is Jaime Chavez, and I'm from Jalisco.
Hey, Jaime, I know, yeah.
Which is older than Albuquerque.
Yes, yes.
And it's a community land grant, which some of you may know as Ejidos, and I've been in the land struggle in New Mexico most of my adult life. I fell in love with radio originally because we didn't have TV, and I ended up as a producer at KUNM Radio, founder of the Zaisis Collective, and programming that still exists. So the infrastructure is still there and it's ongoing. My background is as a community organizer, a national community organizer with the Rural Coalition, where I'm working in 11 states right now, and came to this radio conference. Also, National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association came to this conference because we're exploring low-frequency radio stations among our membership-based organization, 35-year-old organization, and happen to be the largest ethnic organization of farmers in the United States. And so we're concerned about the Farm Bill, and we're concerned about the future of farming, and young folks particularly. You know, it's like priests, you know, they're all dying and stuff, you know. Who's going to be the next generation of farmers? And my love, I think, is I started out in radio doing poetry, and we've been on the same stage at Afro-American Cultural Center.
Yes, we have.
long ago, Mr. Eugene Pickett and Dino and those ones. We haven't had much conversation.
No, but we should.
And I tried to get you on my stage on Day of the Dead at the Samba, but you're in Jamaica.
Yeah, it's this year.
I was informed by Carlos Contreras, who's a mutual bud. And I met Aaron here, and I walked into his circle yesterday with young folks as they were composing poetry and shared with them. And we did a radio show this morning. And I'm just really jazzed about being here and connecting with all of you. I think it's important that the next wave, and it's like, I feel like an old surfer, right? I mean, social movements and what have you, and I'm waiting for that big wave now. Because it came through the 60s and 70s, all of that, civil rights, and everything that was talked about last night in the presentation. So, here we go. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Yes, and
we are talking.
Yeah, he's a legend. He's a legend. And I'm embarrassed I didn't know your face, but I know your name. Because when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah. So, and of course, I heard your name in circles when I used to work at KUNM. Because you guys started that thing. So, yeah.
My name is Susan Parenti. I live in Champaign, Urbana. I'm part of the IMC and the School for Design and Society. This is one of our spaces. Was trained as a experimental music composer and have tried to make that a politicizing activity. So audio, sound has been really important. I've been haunted by how people talk. In one sentence, you can take someone's music composition that they worked on for 6 months and say, sounded like my kid could bang on the piano. So became interested in theater because there I could make conversations go the way I want. Without being trying to be bad or something, I no longer listen to radio. I listen to books on tape. So, the end.
I listen to books on tape too. I like them. Okay, I'm Sarah. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. I'm with WRT Community Radio Station. And honestly, I always wanted to get involved. I always thought, oh, I should know some things about the world. Went into college, sort of had the same feeling. But every single time I got in the car with my parents, they'd have these awful talk radio shows on that, like, couldn't understand. They were so boring. Like, the news was just, like, awful. Like, and I was like, this is horrible. Maybe I don't want to do this. And so just by, like, random chance, actually, I took this journalism class. It was the only English class still available, and I needed an English credit. So I'm in this journalism class, and they take a field trip to WRT radio station. And I walk in. This is nothing like what I heard on the radio station. This building's, like, purple with a mural on the outside and all this, like, crazy political stuff on the inside. And I was like, yes! Signed up for volunteering that day. By the next Tuesday, I was on the air reading news, and I've been in love ever since.
Nice. That's awesome. Cool. Awesome.
That's righteous. My name is Gavin, currently the news director at KYRS in Spokane, Washington. It was a Prometheus barn raising station 8 years ago and has now gone full power. We broadcast all over Eastern Washington, Idaho, even up to the Canadian border. I'm also on the board of Common Frequency based in California. I like to call us like a little punky stepbrother to Prometheus. We support over 100 successful FCC applications and petitions to deny and a lot of that kind of engineering legal stuff. But for me, the Seattle radio market, you had the grunge explosion, which really began in Seattle, and the radio format, which I'm sorry went out and polluted the airwaves of like 99X or whatever, like that basically started in Seattle with The End, which we had local program director, local DJs, that were picking music. They also brought electronic music, a lot of electronic artists to the States early on, like Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and that kind of stuff. So that was a big influence, but I was also always into Cube 93 and hip hop, and particularly I had like shameless R&B love, and then but then also growing up, like my best friend's parents, they always had on KPLU, which is jazz and NPR, and so I was always interested in that. And then you mentioned Demento. There was an equivalent, a local guy named Moskowitz, Music with Moskowitz, and it was all novelty, weird stuff. And so that was one of my fondest memories with my mom, like driving around listening to his weird novelty tunes. So like I've always been into like the whole nine yards, And also I think for me, someone who's so kind of frantic and manic, like the classical station has a certain place too. So, so like I said, it's just kind of like everything except Nashville, pretty much.
Hey, your shirt's mad fun.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like water park, yeah. That's exactly. Okay, it took me for a second. I was like, I don't need to go to a water park.
There's one in town.
I have a question for you in Washington. I'll be there next week conducting a workshop with farmers in Osco.
Okay.
Do you transmit that one?
Our station doesn't, but Tri-Cities needs community media, so we should talk.
Yeah, I like that because I'm blasting right now.
And that kind of, that piece you were talking about, WB, like that's where, what's interesting about that, and like from a media literacy perspective, is that now even the corporate stations like the Clear Channel that come in and kind of Walmart airwaves, they use that too to sound local. So
Right.
now they have people pre-record those and they drop those in different markets to sound, because they already latched on. It's kind of like an AstroTurf kind of thing. They're like, this sounds grassroots, so let's do this in these markets that we consume, right?
The other huge thing I forgot to mention that was huge for me was Casey Kasem in the top 40. Right. I'm not saying that it was all good, but like I've always been a list person and I love like a countdown and Casey Kasem,
And
he has it.
Casey Kasem, we now have Ryan Seacrest.
No comment.
Hello everyone, I'm Vanessa Maria Graber. I'm the Community Radio Director at the Prometheus Radio Project. I'm also on the board of WPEB, which is a community radio station in West Philadelphia, and I'm a member of PhillyCam, which is the public access TV station in Philly. And I'm born and raised from Philly. Just like Hakeem, who failed to mention his Philly roots.
I feel you. Born in Northeast Philadelphia, yes.
Me too, Northeast. All right.
They have the better hospital there. My mom was like, they were like, there's a hospital right here. She's like, I'll wait. Drive me to the Northeast. I'm just in labor here, but let's go.
My parents always listened to radio, mainly because they were broke and they didn't have TV like forever. And my mom is from Puerto Rico, and she always listened to Spanish radio. There was a couple of stations. Now there's only one, but back in the day there was several. And it was the best way for me to learn Spanish and stay kind of connected to the outside world. And my dad was in the Navy, and he traveled all over the world. So he was really obsessed with BBC, and he had a transistor radio that got stations from all over the world. And so I always grew up with it. And then, of course, in Philly, back when there were DJs and mixes, Friday, Saturday night, people was out on the stoop with the radio in the window. And you would have like your little jam out on the patio, on the porch. And that's like what you did when you were, a teenager, because you really can't afford to go anywhere, and, if you grew up in a row home, it's like everybody knows everybody on the block, and, sometimes several people have their radios going because they're like, I don't want to hear that, I'm putting something else on. So it was like really ubiquitous, and the DJs were worshipped, because they were like little local celebrities. Like I remember DJ Rand.
DJ Rand,
right?
Colby Cole.
Yes,
yeah.
Golden Boy.
Golden Boy.
I just really loved hip hop because there's a lot of hip hop in Philly, and people were always rhyming and stuff. So when I went to college, I went to school in the middle of nowhere, and they had no Spanish stations, and they had no hip hop, and anything that resembled like Philly radio, and I felt really sorry for them. And so that's how I got involved in the college radio station, and I did a hip hop show, and the first ever Spanish language show, and I've been in love with radio ever since.
That's a good story. Thank you. Stories are important. That's what this is part of the exercise. Thank you.
My name is Miguel. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, and I work for KFAI Fresh Air Radio in Minneapolis. Program director. No. And I just started working there this past May. And my first real encounter with radio was, of course, trying to get your requests on the air, but then trying to see which radio stations were easier. Some radio stations were hard. Some radio stations they had to wait maybe 3 or 4 hours. And then there was college radio, which maybe would play like 20 minutes later. But I could tell on the air they were starting to get sick of maybe what I was requesting. So given that, you know, I try to take whatever media that was accessible to me, whether it was my mom or Diaz, like old records or somebody's CDs or somebody's tapes, and I would make little mixtapes, you know, to carry with me in case you're in somebody's car or in case somebody wants to listen to something. You know, we would play those, you know, just some kind of sequence programming, you know, and then the media would change, you know, the CDs and things like that. And, you know, people tended to like it, so then I started DJing on, you know, clubs and the parties and you know, started to get a good following. But I never knew anything of community radio growing up the whole time, because, you know, you're only accessible, or whatever's accessible to you without knowing anything. And they were able to provide me an opportunity to have a program. But of course, you know, not so much of the other program. You know, my idea was distinct from the rest of the program, so it was kind of helping them to kind of fulfill their mission, so to say. You know, and my experience has been good. You know, bringing in new audiences. You know, because they're trying to, how do you say, represent underrepresented peoples. You know, and so now, you know, whether it's my friends or my community, now they have a spot to listen to at a station, which is something that whether you're Latino or a person of color, you know, it's something that we've lacked for a long time in the Twin Cities. And so now I'm happy to be part of a station to help utilize or enable more people to get their message across.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great story as well.
I am Aaron Anders. I live right here in good old, somebody called it the People's Republic of Urbana one day.
Were you on the radio this
morning?
morning?
On the, yeah, you called me in this morning. Yeah.
We were listening to you, yeah.
So, but I lived in Chicago till I was in like 7th grade, and I moved here. So I've been here for 25 years or something like that. So this is home now. Falling in love with radio. You know, the question when you first asked it, I was like, I don't love radio. I don't know what you're talking about. But so as I listened to other people, and I thought, okay, radio isn't just the radio station. It's also the guys used to walk around with the box on their shoulder with the D20 motherfucker, D. Right? Radio Raheem from Do the Right Thing, right? So it was that as well. But so when I started to think about it, my uncle, who was very much a father figure for me when I grew up in Chicago, had this tiny little black radio with a white dial. He always listened to the Cubs games over in Chicago in his room. And so that's when I really, I guess, paid attention to the radio. I was very young at that time. And of course, coming from where he was coming from, they didn't have TV, so radio was still very much a part of how he functioned. He listened to the radio a lot. So that was like my first introduction to it. Then my dad, playing music as a, used to sing a lot, and he had all these albums, LPs and 45s and stuff. So we were in the car one day and the song came on, Ain't That a Bitch? Yeah, somebody doing something slick. I always remembered that. For some reason. Maybe because I wasn't supposed to be cursing. But the rhyme, stuck with me too, right? So I remembered that. And so when we moved here to Champaign, it was nothing but soybeans and cornfields when I moved here. Y'all are getting a treat. And 94.5 was the only station to WLRW, and it played soul music one night out of the week. So we just waited by the radio with the tape player to get some something, right? So that was big for us, and that's how my sister and I got a hold of music. Then finally I was helping my neighbor next door to me, the mighty Mr. T. He used to play on WEFT. He was a blues man. I put the squeezing and the pleasing, the mighty Mr. T. That's what he called it. He was on the radio. He always had these big, they were loading up crate after crate after crate of LPs to take them. Where y'all going with this? And so I used to listen to him every now and then. Then a friend of mine, Gene Hicks, who's a hip hop artist, had a show down at WEFT. And I really saw that he got to control what he wanted to play. And that was inspiration to me. He had control over what went out. So I put in a request, and he would play it. That felt empowering, so I had direct access to him. But he was in control of what came over those airwaves. I never forgot that. And then, so finally, as I began to get more active, I caught John Lee Johnson on WBCP, which is the AM station in the black community. Everybody sort of listens to it, but it's definitely been a mainstay in the black community. So he had a radio spot on there, and also on WEFT, Higher Ground, which I do now for WEFT. And that's when I saw the power of getting the message out from a talk standpoint. So I don't know if I think I really, really, really appreciate radio. I don't know if I love it, to tell you the truth. But there's a tremendous amount of respect, and I think it's growing, and I think this conference is even helping me grow even more to appreciate it and love it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. So, yeah, you guys are awesome. Let me tell you. This is my new person. Thank you. New person. So tell me where we say where you're from, who you are, where you're from, and then when and why did you fall in love with radio?
Okay, my name is Jessica. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I don't work with radio. I work in an environmental justice nonprofit in Detroit. I'm an organizer, but I'm really interested in different media narratives, grassroots media narratives. And in terms of radio, I guess this story right here is the fact that I'm so close to Canada. You can pull in Canadian radio. And growing up, like, there's just a fine demarcation between what we could get in Canada and what we could get in Detroit. And you could hear about news not from NPR or public radio that's happening in the US on Canadian stations that you couldn't hear on stations in Detroit. So, you know, that was always something that I was cognizant of growing up. But.
Thank you. So these stories, right? These stories are important. We talk about messaging, why radio matters, why radio should exist in our communities. And though, for those of you that came later, I talked about, today we're going to be talking about this framework of radio and the Radiohead. So we're the Radioheads, right? Not the band. I like the band. But we are like the kind of radio nerds. We're the techies. We're the people that are in it, and that are not just perpetuating the content, but we're also perpetuating the machine that keeps the content getting out there. So when we think about it like that, we need to think about, yes, the shows, so there's programming. Yes, the station, right? Your organizations, can't spell today, stations. And then there's the larger movement, like why radio needs to continue to exist. And all these things work in concert with each other, right? And so it starts with the stories. Now, Media Literacy Project, we do a lot of narrative-based storytelling, and we work with organizations around how to get their issue campaigns, environmental justice, and how to turn those into narrative storytelling campaigns. What we love to do on the left is we love to fact people to death. What's the right thing to do? And it's easy to see the environmental impact. Like, yes, climate change does exist, and we have a lot of facts to prove it, right? And then the other side, whoever the other side is, comes out and they tell a really compelling story. And people align with their values, not with their facts, right? So this is like media messaging, communications 101, right? And we've been losing that war for a long time. So all these things work together in your stories that you've told about your organizations, about your personal experience with falling in love with radio. And so I'll tell you mine, but I wanted to kind of capture a couple of things before I forget them, because I was trying to keep track. And I didn't want to write while you guys were talking, because that's sometimes distracting. But this idea that you can get, I heard Vanessa, she said something interesting, like, do we ever message about radio or our radio stations or our programs the way that Rosetta Stone messages a way to find out about language skills? Because you don't need a PhD in linguistics to understand that some of the fastest way that we all learn languages, whether it's our native tongue, whether it's English, whether it's Spanish, whatever, is through watching television, movies, and listening to radio, right? That's what every language teacher will recommend you do to learn the language. And rather than saying, oh, we really need radio, it's our right, First Amendment right to communicate, it's free speech, the people who don't care about our First Amendment right and free speech, maybe they do care about this. Maybe they do care about this. So how do we then communicate what our stations, our programs, our movement has to offer through this kind of framework right here, and start talking about it in kind of a service delivery mechanism, right? The idea that building community, and I think we do talk about that a lot. I'm also on the board of a public access TV station in Albuquerque, and we've been going through some shit.
Is that quote unquote?
That's quote unquote. Yeah, we've been going through some shit. But when you go through shit together, you find out, where your friends are when your friends aren't. And sadly, in our battle with the city of Albuquerque, which I'm in an interesting position because I now actually represent the city as a poet, but we battled, and I was on the air saying that the city was royally ruining us. But we really came together, and what we have moving forward, because quote unquote is here as part of this conference, which was like strongly encouraged by board members, because we want to move in a direction of, so we don't have the city station anymore, but we do have the internet, we do have radio. And so they're one of the people that are in the market for the LPFM station in Albuquerque, and very well positioned to get it. So anyway, building community is a function of radio. Even though in media, like as a media person, we always talk about, especially new media or social media, media 2.0, how media tends to separate people. Like television has allowed people not to come together around the television, even though it used to. Remember when there was only one TV in the neighborhood and people would go to that house and watch? Like it created community. It created community like the front stoop you were talking about, right? And then it became something that disencouraged or broke up community by having, everyone had one in every home. In my house growing up, they had a TV in every room of the house. So me, my two brothers, my mom, and my dad could all be home for 3 hours and never speak to another person in the house because we're in our room watching television or watching a show, right? So it's interesting, and we have to be careful with this, because I think when we talk about radio, people assume that, well, it's something you listen to in your car. It's something you listen to when you're alone. It's something you do, like, why would you have the radio on if you actually have people in your house? Though, what we know, the reality of our stories is that people actually do gather around the radio. And if they don't gather around the radio when it's happening, they gather later to talk about what they heard or saw on the radio. So you get that water cooler effect, right? But when we're messaging our programs, like when we're talking to the media, as in news media, when we're talking to funders about our stations, when we're talking about this larger movement, do we talk about that? Do we tell that story, right? Or do we just say corporate media is bad? Corporate media rots their brains. Corporate media never plays what I want to hear. Like, no, do we tell this part, the values part of our stories, right? So, for me, my love of hip hop, and we'll continue to collect these throughout the program, because at the end, what I want you guys to be able to leave
some ideas to take back to your organizations on how to kind of tell those stories, tell the story of your show. To retell and reimagine the story of your show, retell and reimagine the story of your station. Like that's what I hope to get out for you guys to get out of this workshop today, messaging. But for me, it started with the tape, like right. So we talked about Kobe Cole, we talked about Rand. Like I grew up right outside of Philadelphia. We moved to South Jersey when I was 5, and it's the same radio market though. And I grew up recording that Friday night radioactive show. Like I would not miss that for anything. And back then, back in the dinosaur days, you guys can go with me. We actually had tapes. And if you brought a tape, like if you bought a tape you didn't like let's say I went and bought, like you will put tape over the corners, right? So you can now use that to record your first mix. And then I started making mixtapes. So we have a similar story there. And I actually was like DJing parties in college just with my mixtapes. Like I'd show up at the little frat house and they'd be like, oh, yo, Hakeem here, you got one of your tapes? I'm like, bam! And then I put it in and then that would be the party. It was way cheaper than a DJ at the time. And so that was my first coming for the music, right? Coming for the music and then staying for the content. And I had a great little tryst, a little love affair with radio then. It was important to me. And then, technology started to change and evolve, and I went away to college, and then I started to kind of live my life until I landed in New Mexico. And when I landed in New Mexico, I was going back for my master's in communications, and I didn't know anyone in New Mexico when I moved there. I could tell you the long story about me and my son's mother, and really she picked Albuquerque, and I had picked Cali, and I wanted to go to University of California, Riverside. And they said no, and UNM said yes. Unfortunate for Albuquerque. And so I ended up there, and I'm 25, And I ended up living in the freshman dorm on the campus of UNM. I didn't know anybody. So I was like, that's cheap, I get the meal plan. And so I'm this old dude living with these in the dorm. And I was looking for a work study job. And the first thing I saw was literally right across the parking lot. I lived in Coronado Hall on Yate Hall, and it was KUNM. It was the student radio station. And so I started the program actually for health communications. My bachelor's in biology. And I applied to UCR as a nuclear medic, student for nuclear medicine. Didn't get in. And I only applied to UNM because at the time she wanted to go to, she was like, well, UNM has a good psych program. I want to get into psych. And I was like, well, I'll apply there for my minor. My minor was in communications. And if I get it, I get it. And I was going for the master's program. So, and they said yes. But they said yes under the auspices that I was going to do health communication. And then the first week I started at KUNM. And I started in the newsroom. That was the job that was available. And man, it took all of probably like 2 weeks before I went to the head of my department and said I want to change my emphasis from health communications to mass media. And I worked for KUNM for 3 years in the newsroom, and I love news. And so I love talk radio, and so I listen to 1350, which is Air America, and I love politics, and I'm just a nerd. And that's what I did for 3 years, and now that's kind of what I do, especially at the Media Literacy Project, is try to encourage people to not just explore other media options as far as intake and consumption, but of course making your own media. And as an artist, it goes back to those early mixtapes. Like, that's your own media. You don't like what you hear on the radio? Create your own, right? Create your own. And so that's the activism part we talk about and create. You don't like what you see? Don't just bitch and moan and complain about it. Make an option for people and make it a good option. And as they say, the market will regulate itself, whatever. So, you know, right, because you created choice. Yeah, you created choice. It's like trickle-down economics. So these stories are important. And before I get lost here, so we're going to do audience analysis next. But these stories are important because the stories sort of help you have a personal relationship with the people that you're trying to get to listen to your show. And I know, especially in our fight with, quote unquote, with the public access TV station, it was like we could tell people the right thing and they could know the right thing, but that doesn't always make them turn out. So, you know, me and Jaime could talk about that as far as movement, working in social movements in general. There's like Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, right? People can know the right thing to do, but what's actually going to sufficiently motivate them to do it. And I think rather than telling them what the right thing to do is to allow them to access your station and everything you're doing through their own story. So what I got out of listening to you guys today that wasn't a part of my initial note preparation was because later we're going to talk about mechanisms to gather people around radio, right? To bring people together around radio. And have you ever thought about doing focus groups? Have you ever thought about gathering people, potluck, weeks in advance, you're talking about on the airwaves, hey, come down to the station, we're going to open the doors on Saturday, and we just want you to come in, we'll feed you, it'll be a good time, and have no agenda. You don't want money from them, you don't want them to sign up and volunteer, because we always want something, especially as nonprofits, right? So we just want you to come down to Volunteer Appreciation, Station Appreciation Day. Come on down, have them sit in a circle just like this, and for 2 hours have them talk about why they love radio. And they don't even have to talk about your station. Just have them do it, and then let them leave. And let them think about what they said. And let them say, oh, I should have said this for the rest of the day. And then tomorrow wake up and be like, oh, I should have talked about this. And then what that's doing is starting to cultivate their attraction to this, the movement, this idea, which I humbly submit that will then attract them to your station, right? And will then attract them to your program if you're a disc jock or a DJ and you have a show. Yes?
We've done things like
Mm-hmm.
that, and I think we avoided the term focus.
Right, yeah, it's boring, yeah.
Almost exactly what you're saying.
How successful?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what people went home and thought afterwards, but yeah, I mean, it's a good thing, it's a good community building, but I guess what I think has always been where it falls short is we're asking the people who are already listening.
Okay. I agree. This is more like cultivating your base.
Yeah.
This is more like, kind of emboldening your base, and how do you get other people to come there. But I think the exercise of it is creating that community.
Yeah.
Like they actually physically come down to do something in person with the radio station, right? And I think that when you get into, I guess I thought of it immediately because I'm relating everything to like what we just finished with KUNM.
How if we would have done that, we'd probably been more successful at getting people to turn out at other things like the city council meetings, the other things we needed them to do, because they actually felt a visceral, personal connection. It's like a force of habit almost at that point, right? And so, yes. Did you have anything to say?
I agree with him because I feel like part of my research all the time is finding out why people don't know about WPED. Why don't they know about the public access TV station?
Sure.
And people that have been in the city for years that are pretty savvy, and they're like, oh, I never heard of that.
Right.
What is that?
Right.
And it seems to be the majority of people,
Sure.
who are just totally unaware, that community media exists. Or they don't even understand the idea of
Right.
public media versus community media.
Sure.
It's totally foreign to them, and it's quite frustrating, to have these sources that are really accessible, that do lots of outreach, and they have lots of opportunities for people to get trained.
Sure.
On the surface, they're doing everything right, and so how do you get people in to